Hello. Our presentation will be about the Paris Agreement and the decision of President Trump to opt out of it. President Trump announced on June 1st that the U.S. would be withdrawing from the Paris Agreement. This decision carried a lot of controversy because most Americans support the U.S. staying inside the agreement. Statistics say that the ratio of people who did want to remain inside to those who did not is around 5 to 1. Most of Democrats support the idea of staying inside the Paris Agreement at around 86%. 61% of independents agree on staying in, but with Republicans, only 49% agree that we should stay inside the agreement. But what is a Paris Agreement? The Paris Agreement is a pact signed by 195 different countries, out of which 147 have ratified the agreement, that pledge to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in order to keep the global temperature from rising as rapidly. Since it is incredibly difficult for countries to unanimously agree on something, like the Paris Agreement, people view this as a reason to stay inside the accord, since countries won't likely see eye to eye in a different one. If the U.S. left the agreement, it would join Syria and Nicaragua as the only countries who refused to take part in the pact. Even North Korea criticized Donald Trump for backing out. Pyongyang stated, quote, "This is a height of egotism and moral vacuum, seeking only their own well-being at the cost of the entire planet." End quote. And while this may sound harsh, there is a bit of truth to it. The United States is the second largest greenhouse gas emitter in the world, under China. President Trump's reasoning for his decision is that it disproportionately affects the United States economically, and in his worldview, the American people come first. And also, while this may sound harsh, there is some reason behind it. The rich countries must provide $100 billion as a floor by the year 2020 as aid to poorer and developing countries. And it must also take the lead in the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, putting it at a disadvantage to some extent. What's your opinion overall on the Paris Agreement?
Well, I think it's important if we're going to clean up the air and whatever. Yes.
Okay. Do you think it's a fitting way to deal with climate change, given that there are other options instead of the Paris Agreement?
Well, there are other options, but so far nothing else has come up. So
that's what a lot of people argue too. That it's
now,
really hard for countries to come together and sign a pact.
So if we can get them together for something, I think that's a big achievement.
I agree.
Except for the United States.
I agree. Switching gears and talking a little bit more about how it would affect the U.S. economically wise, do you think it would be more beneficial for the world or more harmful to the U.S. economically wise?
You know, these environmental issues, it's all about money, and if you can convince Americans that somehow or the other they can make money by trying to clean up the air, I think you'd get more people on board. The always idea in this country is that, if somehow or the other we're going to restrict burning the fossil fuels or whatever else, it's going to cost money, it's going to cost jobs, it's going to do this. But industry has to shift to a different area, and there's a whole lot of money to be made in alternative sources of energy. You just got to convince people that there is money to be made. But yeah, I think one of the things that the U.S. is concerned about is that there's nothing to actually enforce it, or countries can agree, but who's going to actually do it? But the point is that the U.S. is the number one polluter in the world, still.
Yeah.
So if we don't lead the deal, then who's going to do it? So if we're going to wait for all these other tiny countries and stuff, it's not going to get done.
Okay, so I'm guessing your overall opinion on President Trump deciding to leave the Paris Agreement.
I think it's a big mistake.
A big mistake?
Yeah, big mistake.
Well,
I mean, all the evidence is there.
Yeah.
There is no real dispute in the scientific world about climate change and that human beings are partially responsible for it. The debate is outside of the scientific community. So people like the president who has no background in science, and others say there is no human involvement. It's just natural phenomena.
Well, President Trump is his reason behind leaving the Paris Agreement is putting the United States before all the other countries. You know, his reasoning behind it is that it affects the U.S. more than it does any other country because
well, it would, because we're the biggest polluter. It would affect us the most. We're the biggest economy, so it would affect us the most.
with all the regulations and implementations of the Paris Agreement.
Clearly, I mean, going clean, you know, our participation in the program would affect us significantly more than a tiny little country like Chad.
Yeah.
Clearly.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
it's a bad comparison.
And given that Chad is a developing country, the Paris Agreement also states that the richer countries, like the U.S., China, and the European Union would give $100 billion by the year 2020 to fund these developing countries.
Yes, because there is a cost factor that's involved, right? And for a lot of countries, that have poor economies and stuff, it's about burning fossil fuels. It's about burning coal. It's about burning trees. It's about, because that's all they have. So what the developed nations need to do is provide them with an alternative, but that will cost them. That will be an investment, right? So we would have to invest money in finding different ways that these developing countries, because I mean they have to heat their homes, they have to cook their food, they have to do all the things we have to do, but they don't have the technology that we have.
And just like the United States had the Industrial Revolution with
right. Well,
basis of it was coal, oil.
Yeah.
Other countries that are developing now are kind of
they follow
they follow
US,
that also.
They follow what we did. They say, well, you did it. Why can't we? And in many ways, environmental stuff is elitist, because we're telling the world, we did this. We burned all the coal. We burned all the oil. We did all this stuff, but we don't want you to do it.
It's kind of hypocritical.
Yeah, well, yeah, because so many of these developing nations, they follow what we did. They follow what the U.S. and the European countries did.
Yeah.
And they said, well, this is how you got powerful and wealthy, so this is what we're going to do.
Yeah. All right, well, that wraps up our 3 questions.
Okay.